The words came out in flawless Japanese, sharp and dismissive as a blade. Anata wa koko ni iru beki janai. You don't belong here. Akira Tanaka's hand froze on his cleaning cart. The corridor of Chen Global Technologies stretched before him in polished marble silence, broken only by the clack of designer heels approaching from behind. He didn't turn around. After 2 years of working the night shift in this Seattle tower, he knew exactly who spoke those words and why she chose that particular language. Michelle Chen stood 15 feet away, arms crossed over a tailored black suit that probably cost more than Akira's monthly rent. At 38, she was the youngest CEO in the company's 40-year history, a self-made tech billionaire who had transformed her immigrant parents' struggling import business into a $2.3 billion supply chain empire. Her reputation preceded her through every floor of this building, brilliant, demanding, and absolutely intolerant of anything less than perfection. Tonight, she looked furious. Akira had heard the shouting from the executive conference room 10 minutes earlier. Raised voices in Mandarin, Japanese, and English bleeding through soundproofed walls. Something about the Tokyo expansion, about cultural misunderstandings threatening a $500 million partnership. When Michelle's lead negotiator had stormed out, face flushed with embarrassment, Akira had kept his head down and continued emptying wastebaskets. Now Michelle stood in the corridor at 11:43 at night, clearly expecting him to scramble away with mumbled apologies. Most of the janitorial staff avoided her entirely, timing their rounds to miss her notorious late-night work sessions. Instead, Akira slowly straightened. He was 46, lean in a way that suggested discipline rather than deprivation, wearing the same navy coveralls as every other maintenance worker. His thick-framed glasses caught the recessed lighting as he finally turned to face her. "Mushiwake gozaimasen, Chen-san," he said quietly, his Japanese carrying the particular formality of someone who understood its nuances. "I apologize if my work is disturbing you. I can return later if you prefer." Michelle's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Her expression shifted from irritation to something harder to read. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Most people in this building knew she spoke Mandarin fluently, Japanese competently, and 3 other languages with varying proficiency. It was part of her legend, the polyglot CEO who could negotiate in any market. The janitor speaking Japanese wasn't unheard of in Seattle's diverse service economy, but the level of formality he'd just used, the specific honorific, the pitch-perfect accent, these things didn't match the man pushing a cleaning cart. "You speak Japanese," Michelle said flatly, switching back to English. It wasn't a question. "Hi." Akira offered a slight bow, the kind a service worker might give a superior, nothing more. Enough to apologize properly. "Where did you learn it?" For a moment something flickered across Akira's face. Old pain, carefully sealed away. "Here and there. Self-taught, mostly. YouTube, language apps, library books." His English carried no accent. Perfectly American, but somehow careful, as if each word was chosen with precision. Michelle studied him with the intensity she usually reserved for acquisition targets and financial projections. In her world, people fell into clear categories: those who could help her succeed and those who were invisible. Janitors belonged firmly in the latter group, human furniture existing only to maintain the stage where important people performed. But something about this man didn't fit the pattern. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. "What's your name?" Michelle asked. "Akira Tanaka, ma'am." "How long have you worked here, Tanaka-san?" The Japanese honorific came out testing, probing for his reaction. 2 years and 4 months. And in those 2 years, have you learned enough Japanese to speak it formally? From YouTube? Skepticism edged her voice. Akira's expression remained neutral, but his grip tightened slightly on the cart handle. I practice whenever I can. Language learning is something I do in my free time. Michelle took 3 steps closer. Up close, she could see the details that distance had hidden, the quality of his speech, yes, but also the way he held himself. Not with the hunched defeat of someone broken by circumstance, but with a quiet dignity that suggested he'd once occupied different spaces. My negotiation just failed, Michelle said abruptly, watching his face. 6 months of preparation, and my lead negotiator couldn't navigate basic cultural protocols with our Tokyo partners. He used casual language with their senior executives, made assumptions about business hierarchy, and essentially insulted everyone in the room. Akira said nothing, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. We're restructuring our entire Asian supply chain, Michelle continued. The Tokyo partnership is worth $500 million, and access to manufacturers we desperately need. Without it, our expansion dies and Chen Global loses market position we'll never recover. She paused, letting the weight of that failure hang in the air between them. If you were in that meeting, Michelle said, her voice taking on a challenging edge, if you had been the one negotiating with Yamamoto-san and his board, what would you have done differently? The question landed like a test, like a trap. Akira could feel the danger radiating from it. Stepping forward meant exposing himself, revealing knowledge that didn't match his position. Staying silent meant safety, invisibility, the careful stability he'd built over 2 years of night shifts, and deliberate anonymity. But something in Michelle's eyes caught him. Not cruelty exactly, desperation, the look of someone watching something they'd built start to crumble. I would have started with proper introductions, Akira said quietly. Not business cards exchanged across a table, but a formal tea ceremony if possible. Even 20 minutes would demonstrate respect for tradition and hierarchy. Michelle's eyebrows rose fractionally. Go on. During negotiations, I would have addressed Yamamoto-san by his proper title, not his given name. I would have allowed long silences. In Japanese business culture, patience during silence shows thoughtfulness, not awkwardness. And I would have brought a gift, something thoughtful that shows knowledge of their company history, not expensive but meaningful. The words came easily, too easily. Akira could hear himself slipping into old patterns, the cadence of someone who had spent years in boardrooms rather than maintenance closets. Michelle stared at him. Around them, the building settled into late-night silence, the hum of HVAC systems and distant elevator chimes, the only soundtrack to this impossible moment. You're not a janitor, Michelle said finally. Not an accusation, just a statement of observed fact. Akira's jaw tightened. I am tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night I'm scheduled. But you weren't always. Silence stretched between them. Michelle watched something close off behind Akira's eyes, watched him retreat into the safety of his role. If you'll excuse me, Chen-san, Akira said, bowing slightly, I should finish my rounds. I apologize again for the disturbance. He began to turn his cart, preparing to disappear back into invisibility, but Michelle stepped directly into his path, close enough that he had to stop or physically push past her. How much do we pay you? She asked. $18 an hour. I'll pay you $1,000, Michelle said. Right now, cash, to sit in my office for 30 minutes and tell me everything you know about Japanese business culture. Akira looked at her then, really looked at her, and Michelle saw layers of calculation behind his glasses. She watched him weigh options, consider angles, make assessments she couldn't fully read. Why? He asked simply. Because I'm meeting Yamamoto-san again in 2 days, Michelle said. He's giving me one last chance, out of respect for my parents' history with his company. If I fail again, we lose everything. And my lead negotiator, despite his Stanford MBA and 5 years in Tokyo, clearly doesn't know what he's doing. She pulled her wallet from her jacket pocket, extracted 10 crisp $100 bills, and held them out. 30 minutes of your time. That's what I'm offering. Akira looked at the money. $1,000 represented nearly 2 weeks of his salary, working 8-hour shifts cleaning offices while the building's real occupants lived their important lives. It represented his daughter's next month of after-school care, or a dent in medical bills that never seemed to shrink. It also represented a step out of shadows he'd spent 2 years hiding in. I have to finish my rounds, Akira said slowly. I'm paid until 2 in the morning and I don't leave work unfinished. I'll wait, Michelle said immediately. Finish your work. Come to my office when you're done. She tucked the bills back into her wallet, but kept her eyes locked on his. I don't know what your story is, Tanaka-san, and maybe I don't need to, but I know desperation when I see it. You're desperate to stay invisible, and I'm desperate to save my company. Maybe we can help each other. Akira held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded once. Sharp movement that somehow carried more commitment than words. Hi, I'll come to your office at 1:45. Michelle stepped aside, and Akira pushed his cart past her, the wheels squeaking slightly on marble floors. She watched him disappear around the corner toward the East Wing offices, his movements methodical and unhurried. Only when he was out of sight did she release the breath she'd been holding. She looked down at her hands and realized they were trembling, not from fear but from the strange electricity of that exchange. The janitor's eyes had held something she recognized. Intelligence forced into hiding, brilliance compressed under the weight of circumstances she couldn't yet understand. Michelle returned to her office, to the scattered papers and cold coffee cups littering her desk, to the financial projections that showed Chen Global's future hanging by threads. She had built this company through sheer force of will, transforming her parents' modest import business into a supply chain empire. She'd learned to spot talent, to identify people who could help her win. Something told her that Akira Tanaka, night shift janitor, was either going to save her company or reveal exactly how much she'd been missing by never looking at the invisible people around her. She pulled up employee records on her laptop. Akira Tanaka, hired 2 years ago, clean background check, perfect attendance record, no disciplinary issues. Previous employment listed as warehouse logistics coordinator. Before that, nothing, or nothing the standard background check had revealed. The gap itself was revealing. People didn't disappear from the professional world without reason. Illness, family crisis, legal troubles, or simply breaking under pressure. The database offered no clues, just the outline of a man who had fallen from somewhere and landed here, cleaning offices in the middle of the night. Michelle set an alarm for 1:45 and returned to the documents spread across her desk. The Tokyo deal represented her most ambitious expansion yet, a chance to break into markets that could transform Chen Global from regional success to genuine international powerhouse. But ambition without cultural competence was just expensive failure. She'd learned that tonight, watching her lead negotiator commit blunder after blunder, while Yamamoto-san's expression had shifted from polite interest to carefully concealed disappointment. At 1:47, a soft knock sounded on her office door. "Come in," Michelle called. Akira entered, still in his coveralls, carrying nothing but a small notebook and a pen. He'd removed his cleaning gloves, but otherwise looked exactly as he had in the corridor, a night shift janitor stepping into spaces not designed for him. Michelle gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. "Please sit." Akira lowered himself into the chair carefully, as if testing whether it would hold him or reveal itself as an illusion. Michelle pulled the $1,000 from her wallet and set it on the desk between them. 30 minutes, she said, starting now. Tell me how to save this deal. Akira looked at the money, then at Michelle, then at the papers scattered across her desk. His eyes moved quickly, taking in contract terms, cultural exchange proposals, shipping manifests. She watched him read, watched his expression shift as he absorbed information. You're offering Yamamoto-san efficiency, Akira said after a moment. Faster shipping times, lower costs, guaranteed quality control. Yes, that's the entire value proposition. It's wrong, Akira said quietly. Not factually wrong, but culturally wrong. Michelle leaned forward. Explain. Japanese business culture, especially at Yamamoto-san's level, isn't primarily about efficiency. It's about trust, relationship, and long-term stability. You're selling him a transaction. He's looking for a partnership that will last decades. Akira reached for the nearest document, then hesitated. May I? Michelle nodded. Akira picked up the contract proposal and scanned it quickly. Here, he said, pointing to a section on payment terms. You're offering quarterly payment schedules with performance bonuses for early delivery. To American ears, this sounds generous and motivating. To Yamamoto-san, it suggests you expect him to fail deadlines and need financial incentives to perform adequately. Michelle blinked. She'd spent 3 months negotiating those exact terms with her legal team. The gift exchange protocol, Akira continued, his voice taking on a lecturing quality he seemed unaware of. You brought expensive whiskey, yes? A bottle of 25-year-old single malt, $2,000. The price point is correct, but whiskey is too individual, too Western. Yamamoto-san's company manufactures precision electronics. You should have brought something that honors their craft, perhaps a traditional Japanese tool, set used in semiconductor manufacturing, vintage if possible, something that says you understand and respect their specific excellence. He was fully engaged now, leaning forward slightly, his hand gestures unconscious and fluid. Michelle watched the transformation with fascination. This wasn't a janitor reciting YouTube lessons. This was someone who had lived in these spaces, who spoke from deep personal experience. The meeting structure itself, Akira said. You likely scheduled 2 hours with agenda items and time blocks. Michelle nodded slowly. Schedule 4 hours. Agenda should be implicit, not stated. First hour is relationship building. Careful questions about company history, discussion of your parent's connection to his firm. Second hour is very general business philosophy, not specific deals. Third hour, you begin approaching actual partnership terms, but indirectly through hypotheticals. Fourth hour is when serious negotiation begins, but only if the first 3 hours have established proper foundation. Michelle paused. That's half a workday for what I thought was a contract signing. It's not a contract signing, Akira said gently. It's the beginning of a relationship that might someday lead to contracts. The time investment itself communicates that you value this partnership beyond immediate profit. Michelle sat back in her chair, processing. Everything he said made intuitive sense, but contradicted every business instinct she'd developed building Chen Global. Speed, efficiency, clear deliverables. These had been her weapons against larger, more established competitors. You're saying I need to slow down, she said. I'm saying you need to match your pace to your partner's culture. In some markets, speed wins. In others, patience does. Where did you learn this? Michelle asked abruptly. And don't tell me YouTube. I'm paying you $1,000 for honesty. Akira's expression closed again, that familiar retreat she'd seen in the corridor. His hand moved to his notebook, fingers tracing its worn cover in what looked like an unconscious, self-soothing gesture. I worked in Tokyo, he said finally. 7 years, corporate liaison for an American manufacturing firm. My job was building relationships with Japanese suppliers and navigating cultural differences. 7 years is a long time, Michelle said carefully. Why are you cleaning offices in Seattle now? The question hung between them. Akira looked at the $1,000 still sitting on the desk, then at Michelle's face. She saw him weighing truth against privacy, necessity against protection. My daughter, he said quietly. Kenji, she's 11 now. When she was 6, my wife died suddenly. Aneurysm, no warning. I was working in Tokyo at the time, traveling constantly. Kenji was with my wife's sister in Seattle. His voice remained steady, but something in his posture tightened, compressed, as if holding grief physically at bay. After my wife's death, Kenji stopped speaking. Complete elective mutism. Therapists said she needed stability, routine, and a parent who was present, not traveling internationally 50 weeks a year. So I left Tokyo, I left my career. I came back to Seattle and took whatever work allowed me to be home during the day when she needed me. Michelle felt something crack open in her chest. She'd built her empire by viewing people as resources, as means to ends, as pieces in a larger strategic game. Akira's story didn't fit that framework. This wasn't a career pivot or calculated risk. This was everything traded for one person's well-being. Does she speak now? Michelle asked, her voice softer than she'd intended. Yes. For the first time, Akira's face transformed with genuine warmth. It took 2 years, but yes, she speaks, she laughs, she's thriving at school. We have dinner together every night at 6. I help with homework, read with her, tuck her in. Then I come here at 10 and work until 2. It's enough. Enough for what? For her to feel safe, for us to pay rent and medical bills, and build something that resembles normal life. Akira looked directly at Michelle. I could probably find work that uses my experience, that pays better, but it would mean traveling again, missing dinners, becoming the absent parent who lost her once. I won't risk that. So yes, I clean offices, and it's enough. Michelle found herself unable to look away from this man who had just redefined every assumption she'd made about success, sacrifice, and what truly mattered. She'd built $1 billion company and could barely remember the last time she'd had dinner with anyone who wasn't a business contact or potential investor. The $1,000, Michelle said, it's yours, for what you've already given me tonight. She slid the money across the desk. Akira looked at it for a long moment before carefully folding it and tucking it into his coveralls pocket. But I want to make you another offer, Michelle continued, her mind already racing ahead, calculating possibilities. The Tokyo meeting is in 2 days. Come with me. Akira's eyes widened. What? As my cultural consultant, I'll pay you $10,000, enough to cover a month's salary and then some. 1 trip, 2 days in Tokyo, and you help me save this deal. You prep me on protocol, sit in on meetings, ensure I don't make another catastrophic error. Chen-san, I can't. Why not? Give me one good reason. Kenji, Akira said immediately, I can't leave her for 2 days. She has school, routines, expectations of me being there. Bring her, Michelle said without hesitation. I'll cover all expenses, flights, hotel, everything. She can explore Tokyo while you're working, and you'll be together at night. Make it an adventure for both of you. Akira stared at her, clearly stunned by the proposal. Michelle pressed forward, sensing an opening. $10,000, Tanaka-san. That's significant for anyone, but especially for someone managing $18 an hour. And beyond the money, isn't there part of you that misses using everything you spent 7 years learning, that wants to do work that matters, even if just for 2 days? She watched emotions flicker across his face, temptation, Fear, longing, resistance. He was calculating, weighing, trying to find the trap in her offer. "Why do you want me?" Akira asked finally. "You could hire an actual consultant, someone with credentials and reputation. Why risk everything on a janitor you just met tonight?" Michelle considered the question seriously. Why was she doing this? The rational answer involved desperation and limited options. But something else pulled at her, something she couldn't quite name, a recognition of hidden worth, perhaps, or simply the raw strangeness of discovering brilliance where she'd never thought to look. "Because you told me the truth?" Michelle said. "Not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. Because you gave up everything for someone you love, which shows judgment I can trust. And because—" She paused, surprising herself with what came next. "Because I spent 2 years walking past you in these halls without ever seeing you. And tonight, for the first time, I actually looked. What I saw was someone who could help me, yes, but also someone who deserves better than invisibility." The office fell silent except for the ambient hum of electronics and climate control. Outside, Seattle spread below them in lights and darkness, a city of hidden stories and unseen lives. Akira stood slowly, his decision apparent in his posture before he spoke. "I'll need to talk to Kenji," he said. "If she's comfortable with it, I'll go. But 10,000 is too much. 5,000 is fair compensation for 2 days of consulting work." 10,000, Michelle repeated firmly, "and non-negotiable. Consider it back pay for all the insights I would have received over the past 2 years if I'd been smart enough to have this conversation sooner." Akira's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. He extended his hand across the desk. "Then we have an agreement, Chen-san." Michelle took his hand. His grip was firm, calloused from cleaning work, warm with the reality of someone who lived in the world rather than above it. "Thank you," she said, and meant it more deeply than perhaps he understood. "Doitashimashite," Akira replied quietly. "You're welcome." He left her office then, returning to complete his rounds, disappearing back into the building's nighttime rhythms as if nothing had changed. But Michelle remained at her desk, staring at the empty doorway, feeling the distinct sense that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. She'd come to this building tonight facing failure, watching her empire threatened by her own cultural blindness. Now, improbably, she had an ally, a janitor who spoke perfect Japanese and understood nuances she'd never considered. A man who had traded success for presence, ambition for love, visibility for stability. What would it mean to learn from someone like that? To stop measuring worth by titles and paychecks and start seeing the extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Michelle didn't know yet, but she was beginning to suspect that meeting Akira Tanaka would change far more than just her Tokyo negotiations. The real question was whether she was ready for that transformation. The conversation with Kenji happened over breakfast. The next morning, Akira had barely slept, his mind cycling through implications of Michelle's offer, while his body went through familiar motions of the night shift. Now, as pale Seattle dawn filtered through their apartment's small kitchen window, he watched his daughter arrange cereal pieces into precise geometric patterns in her bowl. "Ken-chan," he said softly, using the affectionate diminutive. "I need to talk to you about something important." Kenji looked up, her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, studying his face with the careful attention of a child who had learned early to read adult moods. At 11, she was small for her age, reserved in ways that teachers sometimes mistook for shyness, but Akira recognized as thoughtful observation. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice still carrying traces of morning quiet. "Not wrong, different." Akira set down his coffee. "You know where I work? At the big building downtown?" Kenji nodded. "Chen Global, you clean the offices." "Yesterday, I met the CEO, the woman who owns the company. She has an important meeting in Tokyo, and she asked me to help her because I know about Japanese business culture. Interest sparked in Kenji's expression. Like when you worked there before Mom died? The directness still caught Akira sometimes, but Dr. Morrison, Kenji's therapist, had encouraged this openness. No euphemisms, no dancing around loss. Sarah had died, and acknowledging that truth helped Kenji process rather than bury it. Yes, exactly like that. But here's the thing, the meeting is in Tokyo for 2 days, and Chen-san offered to pay me to go with her. Kenji's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. You'd have to leave. That's what I wanted to talk about. Chen-san said you could come too. We'd fly to Tokyo together, stay in a nice hotel, and while I'm working during the day, you could explore the city or stay at the hotel. We'd have dinners together just like always. He watched emotions flicker across her face. Excitement, fear, uncertainty. Kenji set her spoon down carefully. Would we see Aunt Yuki? She asked. Sarah's sister still lived in Tokyo, though they'd drifted apart after Sarah's death, distance and grief making regular contact too painful. We could try, if you wanted to. Kenji was quiet for a long moment, pushing cereal around her bowl. When she finally looked up, her expression held a maturity that sometimes broke Akira's heart. How much is she paying you? Kenji, Dad. She used the English word, which she did when being particularly serious. I know about the medical bills. I know Mrs. Chen from next door watches me for free because we can't afford regular after-school care. I'm not a baby. Akira reached across the table and took her small hand. $10,000. Enough to cover 3 months of bills and put some in savings. Kenji's eyes widened. Then, surprising him, she smiled. That's a lot of money for 2 days. It is. And we'd get to go to Tokyo together, see where you used to work, maybe get real ramen, not the instant kind. The best ramen you've ever tasted, Akira promised, feeling his chest tighten with love for this brave, practical child who understood sacrifice because she'd watched him make it every day for 5 years. Then we should go, Kenji said decisively. But Dad, you have to promise you'll come back to the hotel every night, not like before when you were always traveling. I promise. This is just 2 days and you'll be with me the whole time. We're a team, remember? Team Tanaka, Kenji agreed, their private phrase. She stood and came around the table to hug him, her thin arms wrapping around his shoulders. I think Mom would want you to do this, to use all the things you know again, even if just for a little while. The words hit Akira with unexpected force. He held his daughter close, blinking against sudden pressure behind his eyes. Sarah had been so proud of his work in Tokyo, had believed in his abilities even when he doubted himself. What would she think of him now, cleaning offices with a doctorate in international business gathering dust in a box somewhere? But she would also see Kenji, thriving, speaking, happy, safe. And she would understand why he'd made the trade. Thank you, Ken-chan, he whispered into her hair, for being brave enough for both of us. Michelle's assistant had booked them on a Thursday evening flight, business class tickets that Akira accepted with quiet discomfort. He'd flown business class regularly during his Tokyo years, but that life felt distant now, separated by grief and reinvention. Arriving at SeaTac Airport with Kenji, both carrying modest luggage, he felt acutely aware of not belonging to either world. No longer the corporate liaison he'd been, not quite the janitor Michelle had discovered. They found Michelle near the gate, dressed in expensive casual clothes, laptop bag over one shoulder. She looked different outside the office, younger, less armored, though still radiating the controlled energy that seemed fundamental to her nature. Tanaka-san, she greeted him with a slight bow that acknowledged his culture. Then she turned her attention to Kenji. And you must be Kenji, Your father has told me wonderful things about you." Kenji bowed back, a perfect formal greeting that made Akira's heart squeeze with pride. "Thank you for inviting us, Chen-san. It's very generous." Michelle blinked, clearly surprised by the 11-year-old's poise and formality. "The generosity is mutual. Your father is helping me with something very important." During the flight, Kenji fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by excitement and the late departure time. This left Akira and Michelle alone in their side-by-side seats, separated from other passengers by the privacy of business class configuration. "She's remarkable," Michelle said quietly, nodding toward the sleeping child. "You can see the care in how you've raised her." "She's the remarkable one," Akira replied. "I just try not to mess it up too badly." Michelle smiled, but it faded quickly. "Can I ask you something personal?" "That depends on the question." "Why didn't you go back?" After Kenji started speaking again, after the crisis passed, "Why didn't you return to corporate work? With your experience, you could have rebuilt that career." Akira was quiet for a long moment, watching clouds stream past the window at 35,000 feet. "Because the crisis never really passed. Kenji speaks now, yes, but she still has nightmares. She still panics if I'm late picking her up from school. She's built her sense of safety around my consistency, my presence. Walking away from that to chase a career that already cost me my wife? I couldn't do it. But you must miss it. The work, the intellectual challenge, using everything you spent years learning." "I do," Akira admitted. "More than I usually let myself acknowledge. There's a kind of death in watching your expertise become irrelevant, in knowing you could contribute something valuable, but choosing not to. But that's the trade. Kenji's well-being for my professional identity. It's not even a difficult choice, really." Michelle studied him in the dim cabin light. "I don't think I could do that. Give up everything I've built. I don't know who I'd be without Chen Global." "I didn't know who I'd be either," Akira said. "I had to figure it out as I went. Some days I'm still figuring it out." "Do you resent her? Kenji, I mean, for requiring that sacrifice?" The question was sharp enough that Akira turned to face Michelle fully. "No, never. Resentment would mean I regret the choice. I don't. I regret the circumstances that forced it, Sarah's death, Kenji's trauma, but choosing my daughter, that's the one thing in the past 5 years I'm absolutely certain was right." Something in Michelle's expression cracked, showing vulnerability beneath her CEO confidence. "I've built an empire," she said quietly. $2.3 billion, 3,000 employees, markets on 4 continents. But I couldn't tell you the last time I had a conversation like this, where someone wasn't trying to sell me something or impress me or position for advantage, where it was just honest. "That's the one benefit of falling off the ladder," Akira said with dry humor. "You stop performing, nothing left to prove. Is that what this feels like to you? Like you fell?" Akira considered. "Sometimes. Other times it feels like I finally stopped climbing something that was never taking me where I actually wanted to go. Success is strange that way. You can spend years chasing it without ever asking if it's actually making you happy." Michelle absorbed this in silence. Around them, the cabin hummed with the sound of pressurized air and sleeping passengers. Somewhere over the Pacific, suspended between continents and identities, they'd found an unexpected space for truth. "Tell me about your marriage," Michelle said. "What was Sarah like?" The question surprised Akira, but he found himself wanting to answer. Brilliant, stubborn. She had this way of seeing through pretense straight to what mattered. When we met, I was already working in Tokyo, completely absorbed in my career. She was finishing her doctorate in educational psychology, writing about how children learn resilience through adversity. His voice softened with memory. She saw through my corporate performance immediately, told me I was running from something, but she couldn't tell what yet. Turned out I was running from fear of being ordinary, of not mattering. The corporate success was armor against that fear. What changed? She did. Being with her taught me that mattering doesn't require achievement. It just requires showing up for the people you love with your whole attention. When Kenji was born, Sarah was terrified. She'd had a difficult childhood and worried she'd repeat those patterns. But I watched her become the most present, attentive parent I've ever seen. She taught me what love actually looks like in practice. Michelle's eyes were bright in the darkness. And then you lost her. Then I lost her, Akira agreed. And I had to decide what to do with everything she'd taught me. I could go back to running, back to achieving and performing and proving. Or I could honor her by being for Kenji what Sarah had been for both of us. Completely present, consistently there, prioritizing relationship over resume. That's why you work nights, Michelle said, understanding dawning. So your days are free for her. Exactly. I'm there when she wakes up. I make breakfast, walk her to school, pick her up, help with homework, make dinner. We have our evenings together. Then she goes to bed and I go to work. It's not perfect, but it's the best I could construct from what was left. Michelle looked out the window at darkness streaked with stars. I don't have anyone, she said quietly. My parents died 3 years ago, within months of each other. No siblings. My last relationship ended because I worked too much. Most days I'm surrounded by people, but completely alone. I tell myself it's the cost of success, but maybe it's just the cost of never learning what you learned, how to prioritize people over performance. Akira heard the ache beneath her words. It's not too late, you know, to learn. Isn't it? I'm 38, set in my ways. My entire identity is wrapped up in being the brilliant, driven CEO. I don't know how to be anything else. You're being something else right now, Akira pointed out. Right now, you're just Michelle, talking to someone honestly. That's a start. She turned to look at him then, and something passed between them in the darkness. Recognition, perhaps. Two people carrying different kinds of loneliness, finding unexpected relief in being truly seen. Thank you, Michelle said, for coming on this trip, for trusting me with your daughter, for being honest. Thank you for seeing me, Akira replied. For 2 years, I was invisible in that building. You're the first person who looked. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then Kenji stirred in her sleep, and both adults turned their attention to the child, the moment passing but not quite disappearing. Tokyo welcomed them with neon and spring rain, the city's familiar chaos washing over Akira like a half-remembered dream. They checked into the Mandarin Oriental, where Michelle had booked them adjoining suites that probably cost more per night than Akira's monthly rent. Kenji's eyes went wide at the luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Tokyo Tower, a bathroom larger than their Seattle apartment's living room, a bed she immediately declared was like sleeping on a cloud. Can we really stay here? She whispered to Akira, as if afraid someone would realize the mistake and evict them. For 2 nights, it's ours, he assured her, courtesy of Chensan's generosity. They met Michelle for dinner in the hotel restaurant, where she'd arranged for traditional kaiseki, a multi-course Japanese meal that arrived in waves of exquisite presentation. Kenji approached each dish with scientific curiosity, asking questions about ingredients and preparation that made the chef emerge from the kitchen to answer personally. Your daughter is very observant, Michelle noted, watching Kenji examine a perfectly arranged plate of sashimi. She gets it from her mother, Akira said. Sarah noticed everything, details that other people missed. What do you notice, Tanaka-san? Michelle asked. About me, about this situation. You must find it strange being here with your former employer. Akira considered carefully. I notice that you're nervous about tomorrow's meeting. I notice that you're treating Kenji and me with unexpected kindness, as if you're working hard to be someone different than the CEO who rules through intimidation. And I notice that you're lonely, Michelle-san. Even here, surrounded by luxury and success, you're profoundly alone. The observation landed with visible impact. Michelle set down her chopsticks and met his eyes directly. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who recognizes it. I was alone for 3 years after Sarah died, surrounded by Kenji but isolated in grief. I know what it looks like. What changed? How did you stop being alone? I started letting people in. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Yes, another Chen, no relation, he added with a slight smile. She lost her husband around the same time I lost Sarah. We started sharing dinners, helping each other. I stopped performing strength and started admitting when I was struggling. Connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. Michelle absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. Kenji, sensing adult conversation, had turned serious, excused herself to explore the dessert menu with intense focus. The truth is, Michelle said quietly, I don't know how to be vulnerable. I built Chen Global by being smarter, tougher, more driven than everyone around me. Showing weakness feels like inviting attack. Maybe, Akira said gently, or maybe it's inviting connection. It depends on who you're showing yourself to. Their eyes held for a moment that stretched longer than professional courtesy allowed. Then the waiter arrived with dessert, and the spell broke, but something had shifted between them. A lowering of walls, a tentative, reaching toward understanding. The morning of the Yamamoto meeting, Akira woke early and found Michelle already up, sitting in the hotel lobby with papers spread across a low table. She looked exhausted and wired simultaneously, running on coffee and nervous energy. Tell me I'm ready, she said when she saw him approaching. You're ready, Akira assured her, but you need to breathe. Yamamoto-san will sense anxiety and interpret it as uncertainty about our value proposition. They went over protocols one final time. Proper bowing angles, when to sit, how long to wait before discussing business, the importance of allowing silence. The gift Akira had helped Michelle select the previous evening, a vintage photograph of Yamamoto's grandfather standing outside his original factory in 1937, discovered through careful research and purchased from a rare book dealer. What if I mess up? Michelle asked, vulnerability showing through her CEO armor. Then you apologize with genuine humility and learn, Akira said. Yamamoto-san isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for authentic respect and long-term partnership. Show him those things and you'll succeed. The meeting took place in Yamamoto Corporation's headquarters, a gleaming building in Minato where tradition and modernity existed in careful balance. Yamamoto-san received them in a conference room that looked out over Tokyo Bay, his senior executives arranged in precise hierarchical order. Akira had coached Michelle to remain slightly behind and to the side during introductions, visible but clearly in a support role. This was her negotiation, but his presence signaled cultural seriousness. When Yamamoto-san's eyes flickered to Akira with recognition, Michelle introduced him simply as my cultural advisor who spent 7 years building partnerships in Tokyo. The meeting unfolded exactly as Akira had predicted. Tea ceremony first, ceremonial and meditative, then careful questions about Michelle's parents, about their history with Yamamoto's company. Michelle's answers were graceful and genuine, showing real emotion when speaking about her parents' respect for Japanese manufacturing excellence. When she presented the vintage photograph, Yamamoto-san's composure cracked for just a moment. He stood, approaching the image with wonder, then bowed deeply to Michelle, a gesture of respect that made his executives shift with recognition. "Chen-san," Yamamoto said in careful English, "this gift shows remarkable thoughtfulness. You honor my family's history." "Your grandfather built something extraordinary," Michelle replied. "My parents taught me to respect those who create with excellence and integrity. Your family embodies both." The business discussion that followed was lengthy, circuitous, punctuated by long silences that Michelle had learned not to fill. Akira intervened only twice, once to clarify a technical term, once to suggest a reframing that addressed concerns Yamamoto hadn't explicitly stated. By the meeting's end, 4 hours after it began, they'd established the framework for partnership, not a signed contract. That would come later, after appropriate reflection and formal proposals, but a commitment to move forward together, to build something lasting. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. In the car back to the hotel, Michelle let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "We did it." "You did it," Akira corrected. "I just provided guardrails. The relationship building, the genuine respect you showed, that came from you." Michelle turned to him, her eyes bright. "I couldn't have done it without you. The last time I was in that room, I failed spectacularly. Today, I felt like I finally understood what I was supposed to be doing." "You were building trust," Akira said. "That's what all of this is about. Business is just the structure that trust takes in professional contexts." They found Kenji waiting in the hotel suite, surrounded by drawings she'd made of Tokyo Tower, sushi, and the view from their window. She launched into detailed descriptions of her day, visiting the hotel's pool, watching Japanese television she couldn't understand but found fascinating, trying to order room service in her limited Japanese. "Dad, can we call Aunt Yuki?" she asked suddenly. "I want to see if she remembers me." Akira exchanged glances with Michelle, who quietly excused herself to her own suite. The call with Yuki was emotional and tentative, both sides negotiating around grief that had driven them apart. But Kenji's openness, her simple desire to connect, gradually melted the ice. By the call's end, they'd agreed to meet for lunch the following day. That evening, after Kenji fell asleep, Akira found Michelle on her suite's balcony, looking out over Tokyo's endless lights. She'd changed into casual clothes and held a glass of wine, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "May I join you?" he asked. She gestured to the empty chair beside her. They sat in companionable silence, the city's distant noise a soothing backdrop. "Thank you," Michelle said finally, "for everything, for trusting me with this opportunity, for helping me see what I was doing wrong, for being patient with someone who's still learning how to be human." Akira smiled. "You're more human than you think, Michelle. You just spent years believing that humanity was weakness. It's not. It's actually your greatest strength." "Is that what you tell yourself when you're cleaning offices at 2 in the morning?" "Sometimes. Other times I just focus on doing the work well, on getting home to Kenji, on taking the next step forward. Meaning doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's just present in small, repeated acts of care." Michelle turned to face him. "What happens when we go back to Seattle? Do you return to being invisible? Do I go back to seeing right through you?" "I don't know," Akira admitted. "I hadn't thought that far ahead." "I have." Michelle's voice was quiet but certain. "I want to offer you a position, cultural liaison, consultant, whatever title makes sense. Real salary, daytime hours so you can still be present for Kenji. Your experience is too valuable to waste emptying trash cans." Akira felt something tighten in his chest, hope and fear braided together. Michelle, that's generous, but you're scared of disrupting the stability you've built, of risking Kenji's well-being for professional opportunity. I understand, but consider this. What if the opportunity actually supports that stability? Better pay, better hours, work that engages your mind. You could build something sustainable instead of just surviving. And if it doesn't work, if the demands escalate, if the travels start again, then we will renegotiate. I'm not asking you to sacrifice your daughter for my company. I'm suggesting maybe there's a way to honor both. You've spent 5 years proving you can be present for Kenji. Maybe it's time to prove you can also be present for yourself. The words hit Akira with unexpected force. He'd become so focused on sacrifice that he'd stopped imagining alternatives. What if Michelle was right? What if there was a path forward that didn't require choosing between daughter and dignity? "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless." They sat together as Tokyo glittered below them, two people from impossibly different worlds, finding unexpected common ground. Somewhere in the suite behind them, Kenji slept peacefully, safe in the knowledge that her father was near. That security, Akira realized, didn't actually require his martyrdom. It just required his presence and love. Maybe Michelle was offering him both. The lunch with Aunt Yuki took place in a small restaurant in Shibuya, a neighborhood Akira had once known well. Yuki arrived looking older than her years, grief having carved new lines into familiar features, but when she saw Kenji, something in her expression softened and broke simultaneously. "You look so much like your mother," Yuki whispered, pulling Kenji into a hug that lasted long enough to make both of them cry. Akira watched his daughter reconnect with her aunt, watched years of distance begin to heal through simple presence and willingness to try. Michelle had insisted on joining them, claiming she wanted to explore the neighborhood, but Akira suspected she simply wanted to witness this reunion, to see what connection looked like when people chose it despite pain. Over lunch, Yuki told stories about Sarah, her sister's fierce intelligence, her stubborn optimism, her absolute belief in Akira's capabilities, even when he doubted himself. "She would be so proud," Yuki said, looking at both Akira and Kenji, "of how you've taken care of each other, of how you've survived." "We're not just surviving anymore," Kenji said with unexpected firmness. "We're actually living, right, Dad?" Akira met his daughter's eyes and saw wisdom beyond her years reflected there. "Right, Ken-chan, we're living." After lunch, as they walked through Shibuya's famous crossing, Michelle fell into step beside Akira while Kenji explored ahead with Yuki. "I see it now," Michelle said quietly. "See what?" "Why you made the choice you did. Watching you with Kenji, with Yuki, you didn't just save your daughter by being present. You saved yourself. You became someone Sarah would recognize and be proud of. That's its own kind of success." Akira nodded slowly. "I think that's the first time anyone's understood that. Most people see sacrifice. You see transformation." "Maybe because I'm starting to transform too," Michelle admitted. "Being here with you and Kenji, seeing how you navigate the world, it's showing me what I've been missing, not just in business strategy, but in basic human connection." "You're lonely," Akira said gently, "but you don't have to be. Are you offering to fix that?" There was something tentative in her voice, vulnerable. "I'm offering friendship, real friendship, not networking. Whatever comes from there, we figure out as we go." Michelle smiled, and for the first time since meeting her, Akira saw genuine joy reach her eyes. "I'd like that very much." Their final evening in Tokyo, Michelle arranged a private dinner at a traditional ryokan overlooking the city. The three of them, Michelle, Akira, and Kenji, shared a meal that felt less like business obligation and more like family. They talked about everything and nothing. Kenji's school projects, Michelle's early struggles building Chen Global, Akira's memories of his years in Tokyo. As the evening wound down and Kenji began yawning despite her attempts to stay awake, Michelle leaned back and observed the scene with visible contentment. "This," she said softly, "is what I've been missing. This feeling of actually being with people instead of just existing alongside them." "Welcome to the club," Akira said with gentle humor. "Membership requirements include vulnerability, honesty, and willingness to occasionally mess up in front of people who care about you." "I think I can manage that," Michelle replied, "especially with good teachers." Later, after Kenji had fallen asleep and they stood once again on the hotel balcony overlooking Tokyo, Akira made his decision. "I'll take the position," he said, "on 3 conditions. 1, my hours have to protect my time with Kenji. 2, if the demands ever escalate beyond what I can manage while being present for her, I can step back without penalty. 3, you have to promise to be honest with me about what you need both professionally and personally. No more hiding behind the CEO armor." Michelle extended her hand. "Deal. All 3 conditions. No negotiation necessary." They shook, the gesture feeling less like a business agreement and more like a pact between equals. 2 people choosing to trust each other despite every rational reason not to, choosing connection despite its inherent risks. "Thank you," Michelle said, "for taking a chance on me, on this." "Thank you for seeing me," Akira replied, "for looking past the uniform to who I actually am." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility neither was quite ready to name. Then Kenji's voice called from inside. "Dad, can you tuck me in?" And the spell broke gently. "Go," Michelle said, smiling. "Family first, always." As Akira went to his daughter, Michelle remained on the balcony, looking out over the city where everything had changed. She'd come to Tokyo desperate to save a business deal. She was leaving with something far more valuable, a friendship that was teaching her what success actually looked like when measured in human terms rather than financial ones. Tomorrow they would return to Seattle, to their different worlds that no longer felt quite so separate. Akira would step into a new role that honored both his expertise and his priorities. Michelle would begin learning how to lead with vulnerability instead of just authority. And Kenji would have 2 adults in her life committed to showing her that transformation was possible, that people could change and grow, that the walls between different worlds were more permeable than they appeared. High above Tokyo, as stars emerged between skyscrapers, 3 lives were being gently rewoven into patterns none of them had imagined. The janitor, the CEO, and the child who believed in both of them, finding their way toward something that looked remarkably like family. The journey was just beginning. 6 months later, Seattle embraced early autumn with characteristic gray skies and persistent drizzle. Chen Global Technologies hummed with renewed energy, the Tokyo partnership having transformed not just the company's supply chain, but its entire culture. Michelle had implemented changes inspired by her time with Akira, employee recognition programs, cultural sensitivity training, a visible commitment to seeing value in every person, regardless of their title. Akira's new role as Director of Cultural Integration had evolved beyond what either of them had initially envisioned. He worked from a corner office on the executive floor, daytime hours that allowed him to drop Kenji at school and pick her up each afternoon. His expertise had proved invaluable across multiple international partnerships, but more than that, his presence had changed how Michelle approached leadership itself. They'd fallen into an easy collaboration that blurred the lines between professional and personal. Coffee meetings that stretched into lunch, strategy sessions that veered into conversations about Kenji's latest school project or Michelle's tentative attempts at building friendships outside of work. They hadn't named what was growing between them, both too cautious to risk the balance they'd achieved. But others noticed. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning when Harrison Blake, the venture capitalist who'd tried to oust Michelle months earlier, published an article in a major business journal. The piece was titled, "Diversity Theater, When Good Intentions Undermine Meritocracy," and it singled out Chen Global as an example of what he called virtue signaling over competence. The article specifically mentioned Akira, describing him as a former janitor elevated to executive leadership not through relevant qualifications, but through personal connection to the CEO. It questioned Michelle's judgment, suggested impropriety in their relationship, and argued that true diversity required hiring from top universities, not promoting from janitorial staff. The story went viral by noon. Business Twitter exploded with debate. Some defended Michelle's innovative approach. Others piled on with Blake's critique, calling the promotion affirmative action gone wrong, and questioning whether Akira's doctorate and 7 years of Tokyo experience even existed. Akira saw the article while sitting in his office and felt the world tilt sideways. Everything he'd rebuilt over 6 months, his professional dignity, his sense of contributing value, his tentative belief that he deserved this opportunity, suddenly felt exposed and fraudulent. Michelle burst into his office without knocking, her face flushed with fury. "This is character assassination. We're going to sue Blake into oblivion." "No," Akira said quietly, his voice steady despite the roaring in his ears. "We're not." "Akira, he's calling you unqualified. He's implying our relationship is inappropriate. He's trying to destroy everything we've built. He's also touching on fears I already have," Akira said, meeting her eyes. "Every day I wonder if I actually deserve this position, or if you gave it to me out of guilt or attraction or some misguided attempt to fix the universe's unfairness. Blake's article just makes public what I've been thinking privately." Michelle sank into the chair across from his desk. "You think you don't deserve this position?" "I think I went from cleaning offices to director in 6 months. That's not a normal trajectory. People have a right to question it." "People have a right to question my judgment as CEO," Michelle corrected sharply. "They don't have a right to question your qualifications. Your doctorate is real. Your Tokyo experience is real. Your contributions here have been transformative. The only thing that's questionable is whether I've been transparent enough about how valuable you are." But the damage was done. Over the next 48 hours, the story metastasized. News outlets picked it up. Industry analysts weighed in. Former colleagues from Akira's Tokyo years were tracked down and interviewed. Some confirmed his expertise. Others, harboring old resentments, painted a less flattering picture. Then someone found Sarah's obituary, found Kenji's name, started asking questions about whether a single father should be in a demanding executive role, whether his tragic backstory had influenced Michelle's hiring decision more than his actual abilities. The evening the story broke. About Kenji, Akira came home to find his daughter sitting at their kitchen table, her laptop open to an article that should never have crossed an 11-year-old's screen. "Is it true?" she asked when he entered. "Are people saying Dad got his job because Mom died and you felt sorry for us?" Akira felt something break inside him. He crossed to Kenji and knelt beside her chair. "Some people are saying that, yes. They're wrong, but they're saying it." "Why are they wrong?" "Because Michelle offered me this job based on my experience and knowledge. Your mom's death is part of my story, but it's not the reason I'm qualified. Does that make sense?" Kenji nodded slowly, but Akira could see doubt taking root. "At school today, Emma's mom asked if we were going to be okay. If your job was safe. Everyone's talking about us." This was Akira's worst fear realized. Not damage to himself, but to Kenji. The stability he'd worked so hard to build, the sense of security that had allowed her to thrive, was being threatened by his visibility, by his willingness to step out of invisibility. That night, unable to sleep, Akira drafted his resignation letter. Stepping down would end the controversy, protect Kenji from further scrutiny, return him to the shadows where people like him apparently belonged. He could find another janitorial position, rebuild the quiet life that had worked well enough before Michelle offered him something more. Michelle found him in his office the next morning, the resignation letter sitting on his desk. She read it without speaking, her face cycling through emotions too complex to name. "No," she said finally. "Michelle, no, I won't accept this. You're running because you're scared, and I understand that fear. But giving Blake what he wants, letting him drive you back into invisibility, that's not protection. That's surrender." "It's not about Blake," Akira said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "It's about Kenji. She's being affected by this. She's facing questions at school, watching me struggle with public scrutiny. I built our whole life around giving her stability, and now I'm the source of instability." Michelle sat down across from him, leaning forward with intensity. "Akira, listen to me. Kenji is watching you right now. What do you want her to learn from this moment? That when people attack you unfairly, you collapse and hide? Or that you stand firm in knowing your worth, even when others question it? I want her to learn that her well-being matters more than my ego." Is that really what this is about? Or is it about your own deep fear that maybe Blake is right, that you don't deserve to be here? The question landed like a physical blow. Akira looked away, unable to meet Michelle's eyes. "I worked as a janitor for 2 years," he said quietly. "Every night I cleaned offices where people like you, brilliant, accomplished, important people, did work that mattered. I told myself I was okay with that I'd made my peace, with falling from relevance. But the truth is, some part of me believed I deserved that fall, that losing Sarah was punishment for prioritizing career over family when she was alive." Michelle's expression softened. "Oh, Akira, so maybe Blake is right. Maybe I don't deserve to be on this floor, in this office, pretending I belong among people who never fell. Maybe the universe is just correcting an anomaly." "Stop," Michelle said firmly. "Stop right there. You didn't fall because you deserved to. You chose to step down because your daughter needed you. That's not failure. That's the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. And yes, you worked as a janitor. You also hold a doctorate, spent 7 years mastering international business, and have contributed more to this company in 6 months than most executives do in their entire careers." She stood and began pacing, her CEO energy returning. "Blake is attacking you because you represent something that threatens his worldview. You prove that worth isn't determined by pedigree or uninterrupted career trajectories. You prove that brilliance exists in unexpected places, and you prove that companies can succeed by valuing people rather than just resumes." "Michelle, I appreciate—" "I'm not finished," she cut him off. "You also represent something that threatens me personally. You've shown me what actually matters. Presence over performance, relationship over resume, vulnerability over victory. Being with you has forced me to question everything I built my identity on. And yes, that's uncomfortable, but it's also the best thing that's ever happened to me." Akira looked up sharply at the confession in her words. Michelle met his eyes directly. "I'm in love with you, Akira. I've been in love with you since Tokyo. Maybe since that first night in the corridor when you spoke to me in flawless Japanese and showed me I'd been blind to extraordinary people right in front of me. So yes, my judgment about your value is personally compromised. But it's also professionally sound, which is why every metric we track shows your division succeeding beyond projections. The admission hung between them, transforming the air in the office. Akira stood slowly, moving around his desk to stand before her. "You can't say things like that right now," he said quietly. "You can't cloud this decision with feelings." "Why not? Feelings are data too. They tell us what matters, what's worth fighting for, what we're willing to risk." "I'm willing to risk my reputation to keep you here. The question is whether you're willing to risk staying." Before Akira could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Kenji's school. She'd gotten into an altercation with Emma, the classmate whose mother had questioned their situation. Could he come immediately? The drive to Kenji's school happened in tense silence, Michelle insisting on accompanying him despite his protests. They found Kenji sitting in the principal's office, her face set in stubborn defiance that reminded Akira painfully of Sarah. "She called you a charity case," Kenji said immediately when Akira entered. "She said her mom said your job is fake and Michelle only gave it to you because she feels sorry for us. So I pushed her." The principal, Mrs. Anderson, sighed. "Physical confrontation isn't acceptable regardless of provocation, but I'll admit Emma's comments were inappropriate and we'll be addressing that separately." "I'm not sorry," Kenji added, looking directly at her father. "You always tell me to stand up for what's right. Is it right that people say you don't deserve your job? Is it right that they talk about Mom like she's just a sad story to make you look pathetic?" Akira knelt in front of his daughter, his heart breaking and swelling simultaneously. "No, it's not right, but violence isn't the answer." "Then what is?" Kenji demanded. "How do we fight back when people attack us?" Michelle stepped forward. "May I?" At Akira's nod, she crouched beside him, meeting Kenji at eye level. "Kenji, your father is one of the most qualified people in my entire company. He earned his position through years of study, real-world experience, and abilities that very few people possess. The only reason anyone is questioning that is because they're uncomfortable with stories that don't fit their expectations." "So what do we do?" Kenji asked, her voice wobbling between anger and fear. "We tell the truth," Michelle said simply, loudly and clearly. "We show everyone exactly who your father is and what he's accomplished, and we let them make their judgments based on reality instead of assumptions." Akira looked at Michelle, understanding dawning. "You're suggesting we go public with everything." "I'm suggesting we stop hiding. We release your full credentials, testimonials from Tokyo partners, performance metrics from your current role. We let people see the complete picture instead of Blake's distorted version." "That means more scrutiny," Akira said, "more attention." "Yes, but this time, attention is based on truth rather than fiction. I can't promise it won't be uncomfortable, but I can promise I'll be standing next to you the entire time. If you will let me." Kenji looked between the two adults. "Does this mean you're going to keep your job, Dad?" Akira looked at his daughter, brave, fierce, fighting for him the way he'd always fought for her. He looked at Michelle, vulnerable despite her power, offering partnership instead of rescue. He thought about Sarah, about the lessons she'd tried to teach him, about worth and presence and refusing to hide from life even when it hurt. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, I'm keeping my job, but more than that, I'm done apologizing for deserving it." The press conference happened 3 days later in Chen Global's main auditorium. Media from across the country attended, drawn by the controversy and Michelle's promise of complete transparency regarding recent allegations. Akira sat beside Michelle at the podium, Kenji in the front row beside Mrs. Anderson, who had insisted on showing support. His full credentials were displayed on screens behind them: doctorate from Berkeley, published papers, Tokyo partnership portfolio, 6 months of performance metrics from Chen Global. Michelle spoke first, her voice carrying absolute authority. Harrison Blake's article questioned my judgment in hiring Akira Tanaka. I welcome that scrutiny. Every CEO should be held accountable for their decisions. So let me explain exactly why I made this one. She walked through Akira's qualifications methodically, each credential supported by documentation displayed on the screens. Then she shifted to his contributions at Chen Global. 7 new international partnerships, 15% increase in supply chain efficiency, cultural training programs that had reduced misunderstandings and improved employee satisfaction across all departments. But Blake's real issue, Michelle continued, isn't Akira's qualifications. It's his trajectory. Blake can't comprehend how someone goes from cleaning offices to executive leadership, so let me explain how that happened. She told the story of the night in the corridor, of Akira's flawless Japanese and unexpected insight. She described the Tokyo meeting, his expert guidance, the partnership that had transformed Chen Global's market position. She was methodical, factual, leaving no room for romantic speculation. I didn't hire Akira despite his janitorial work, Michelle said. I hired him because his janitorial work revealed something I'd been missing, that I'd built a company that only valued people who looked successful, who'd never experienced setbacks, who fit neat narratives about uninterrupted achievement. Akira shattered that comfortable delusion. Then it was Akira's turn. He approached the microphone with Kenji's words echoing in his mind. Tell the truth. Loudly and clearly. My name is Akira Tanaka, he began. I hold a doctorate in international business from Berkeley. I spent 7 years in Tokyo as a corporate liaison. And yes, I spent 2 years working as a janitor at Chen Global Technologies. He paused, letting the contradiction sit. After my wife Sarah died suddenly, my daughter stopped speaking. Therapists told me she needed stability and presence. My high-powered career couldn't provide either, so I made a choice that many people apparently find incomprehensible. I chose my daughter over my career. Kenji watched from the front row, her eyes bright. For 2 years, I cleaned offices. I worked night shifts, so my days were free for Kenji. I watched accomplished people do important work while I emptied their trash cans. And yes, there were moments I felt invisible, irrelevant, like I'd fallen from somewhere I deserved to be. But here's what I learned during those 2 years. Worth isn't determined by job titles. Intelligence doesn't disappear because circumstances force you into service work. And sacrificing career for family isn't failure. It's one of the few things in life that's absolutely unquestionably right. The room was silent except for the click of cameras. Michelle Chen didn't give me a job out of pity, Akira continued. She gave me an opportunity to use expertise I'd never stopped possessing. She saw past the uniform to who I actually was. The question isn't whether I deserve this position. The question is why it took someone as bold as Michelle to look past surface assumptions and see what was already there. He stepped back from the microphone, his part finished. Michelle moved forward again. Chen Global has always claimed to value diversity and merit, she said. Akira's story forces us to define what those words actually mean. Are we only diverse if we hire from top universities? Is merit only recognized if it arrives in traditionally credentialed packages? Or are we brave enough to acknowledge that brilliant people exist everywhere, including in the invisible spaces we've trained ourselves not to see? She looked directly into the nearest camera. I'm proud to work with Akira Tanaka. I'm proud of the company we're building together. And I'm proud to defend a decision that I'd make again without hesitation. If that costs me Blake's approval or anyone else's, I consider it a reasonable price. The Q&A session that followed was contentious. Reporters pressed on the personal relationship, on potential conflicts of interest, on whether emotions had compromised professional judgment. Michelle fielded each question with patient precision, neither confirming nor denying personal feelings, but insisting that professional metrics spoke for themselves. One reporter asked Akira directly, "Do you ever regret giving up your Tokyo career? Do you wonder what you might have achieved if you'd made different choices?" Akira looked at Kenji before answering. "I regret that Sarah died too young. I regret that Kenji experienced trauma no child should face. I regret that circumstances forced impossible choices, but I don't regret choosing my daughter, and I don't regret the 2 years I spent in invisibility, because they taught me something about worth that success never could, that you don't stop being valuable just because the world stops noticing you." The press conference ended without dramatic revelations or explosive confrontations, just truth methodically presented, leaving people to draw their own conclusions. The response over the following days was mixed. Some outlets praised Chen Global's innovative approach. Others maintained that proper career trajectories mattered and questioned the wisdom of hiring from janitorial ranks. But something shifted in the broader conversation. People started sharing their own stories of setbacks, of careers interrupted by caregiving, of brilliance hiding in unexpected places. Harrison Blake published a follow-up piece doubling down on his criticism. It received far less attention than his original article. The narrative had moved beyond him, toward larger questions about how society values people and what qualifications actually matter. 2 weeks after the press conference, on a Saturday afternoon when Kenji was at a friend's house, Michelle appeared at Akira's apartment door. She carried takeout from the Thai restaurant he'd mentioned liking, a bottle of wine, and an expression of nervous determination. "Hi," she said when he opened the door. "Is this okay? Showing up unannounced?" "Always," Akira said, stepping aside to let her enter, "though you could have called." "I wanted to be brave," Michelle admitted, "the way you were brave at the press conference, the way you're brave every day." They ate dinner at Akira's small kitchen table, the one he'd shared with Kenji for 5 years, the one where important conversations happened and homework got completed and family life unfolded in ordinary moments. Michelle looked around the modest apartment with visible emotion. "This is what you protected," she said quietly. "This space, this life with Kenji. I understand now why you were willing to trade everything else." "It's not much," Akira said, suddenly self-conscious about the worn furniture and outdated appliances. "It's everything," Michelle corrected. "It's home in ways my penthouse has never been. It's built on love instead of achievement. That's worth more than anything I've accumulated." They moved to the small living room after dinner, sitting together on the couch that had seen countless movie nights and bedtime stories. The silence between them felt charged with everything unspoken since Tokyo. "At the press conference," Michelle said finally, "I didn't confirm or deny our personal relationship. I noticed. I wanted to protect you from additional scrutiny, but that wasn't fair to either of us. It suggested there was something inappropriate to hide." Akira turned to face her fully. "Is there something inappropriate?" "There's something real," Michelle said. "Something that started in a corridor when a janitor spoke to me in Japanese and made me question everything I thought I knew about worth and visibility. Something that deepened in Tokyo when I watched you with Kenji and understood what love actually looked like in practice. Something that terrifies me because I've never been good at anything except work, and this isn't work." "No," Akira agreed quietly. "This isn't work." "I love you," Michelle said, the words direct and vulnerable. "I love your integrity and your sacrifice and the way you see the world. I love watching you with Kenji. I love that you challenge every assumption I've built my life on, and I love that you make me want to be someone different than the person I was." Akira reached for her hand. "I love you too. I've been terrified to admit it, terrified of risking the stability I've built, terrified of being the absent parent again if a relationship demands too much. But Michelle, you've never demanded anything except honesty. You've shown up for Kenji and me in ways I never expected. You've earned my trust. Where does that leave us? Michelle asked. I don't know, Akira admitted. You're still my boss. That complicates things. And I have a daughter who needs to be the priority always. Any relationship with me comes with significant conditions and limitations. I understand, Michelle said, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I'm just asking for honesty, for the chance to build something at whatever pace makes sense for you and Kenji, for permission to show up and be part of your lives, not as CEO or boss, but as Michelle, just Michelle. Akira studied her face, this brilliant, fierce woman who had learned vulnerability, who had defended him publicly, who had proven herself willing to risk her reputation for his worth. Sarah would have liked her, he realized. Sarah would have appreciated someone who pushed him toward growth while respecting his boundaries. Just Michelle sounds perfect, he said quietly. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, gently, tentatively, crossing the distance between professional and personal, between careful and committed. When they pulled apart, Michelle was crying and smiling simultaneously. I never thought I'd get to have this. Someone who knows me completely and chooses me anyway. I never thought I'd want this again, Akira admitted. After Sarah, I believed that chapter was closed. But Kenji was right. Mom would want me to be happy. She'd want me to build a life that's more than just survival. They talked until late, planning carefully how to navigate their relationship, maintaining professional boundaries at work, building personal connection outside of it, introducing Michelle gradually into Kenji's life as something more than Dad's boss. It would require patience, clear communication, and willingness to adjust as needed. But for the first time in 5 years, Akira felt something like hope expanding in his chest. Not hope for returning to who he'd been before Sarah's death, but hope for becoming someone new. Someone who integrated all his experiences into a whole person capable of both professional contribution and personal connection. The board meeting 3 months later felt like an entirely different universe than the one where Harrison Blake had tried to oust Michelle. The Tokyo partnership had exceeded every projection. Akira's cultural integration work had opened doors to markets Chen Global had never successfully penetrated. Employee satisfaction scores had climbed steadily as Michelle implemented policies prioritizing people over pure productivity. But more than metrics, something fundamental had shifted in how the company understood value. The story of the janitor turned executive had become legendary within Chen Global, inspiring employees at every level to share their own hidden expertise, their own unexpected qualifications, their own stories of setbacks that hadn't defined them. Michelle stood before the board with confidence born not just from success, but from knowing she'd made decisions aligned with her values. Our revenue is up 32%. Our employee retention has improved by 40%. We've established partnerships in 8 new markets. But more importantly, we've built a culture that sees people completely, not just their current titles, but their full capabilities. One board member, an older woman who'd been skeptical of Michelle's approach, raised her hand. Michelle, I'll admit I had concerns about your hiring decisions, but watching how this has unfolded, I'm convinced you've discovered something other companies are missing. The question is, how do we scale this? How do we build systems that consistently identify hidden talent? Michelle smiled. That's exactly what Akira's division is working on. He's developing assessment tools that look beyond traditional credentials to identify actual skills and experience. We're partnering with community colleges and workforce development programs, to create pathways for people whose careers have been interrupted or derailed. It's not about lowering standards, it's about expanding how we recognize excellence. The initiatives rolled out over the following months transformed Chen Global into something resembling a laboratory for new approaches to talent. Other companies watched with interest, some dismissive, others intrigued. Michelle fielded speaking requests, media interviews, questions about whether her approach was sustainable or just expensive virtue signaling. "Time will tell," she said in one interview, "but I'd rather build a company that occasionally makes expensive mistakes while trying to see people completely than one that efficiently maintains blindness to extraordinary capabilities hiding in plain sight." Kenji's 12th birthday party happened on a sunny Saturday in June. In the small backyard of the house Akira and Michelle had recently purchased together. The guest list was eclectic: Kenji's school friends, neighbors from the apartment building, Chen Global employees, Aunt Yuki visiting from Tokyo. Michelle stood at the grill, concentrating seriously on not burning hamburgers, while Akira supervised a water balloon fight with the focused intensity he brought to everything. Kenji moved between groups with easy confidence, so different from the silent, traumatized 6-year-old she'd been. Mrs. Chen from the old apartment complex approached Michelle, observing the scene with warm approval. "You've been good for them, for both of them." "They've been good for me," Michelle corrected. "I didn't know what I was missing until Akira showed me." "Love makes us brave," Mrs. Chen said. "Makes us willing to change, to grow, to become people we didn't know we could be." Michelle watched Akira throw a water balloon with perfect aim, watched him laugh when Kenji retaliated with 3 simultaneous throws, watched him be present and joyful and exactly where he needed to be. "Yes," she agreed, "it does." Later, after guests had left and Kenji had gone to bed, exhausted and happy, Michelle and Akira sat together on their new back porch. The house was modest by Michelle's previous standards, but felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. "Happy?" Akira asked, taking her hand. "Happier than I knew was possible," Michelle admitted. "A year ago I was alone at the top of my empire, convinced that was a success. Now I'm here with you and Kenji, and I finally understand what actually matters." "What's that?" "Being seen," Michelle said simply. "Seeing others, building something together that's bigger than individual achievement. You taught me that." Akira shook his head. "We taught each other. You showed me I could step back into visibility without losing what I'd built with Kenji, that I could contribute professionally while prioritizing personally. That success and presence aren't actually opposites." They sat in comfortable silence as Seattle evening settled around them, the city's lights beginning to emerge against the darkening sky. Somewhere upstairs, Kenji slept peacefully in her room, secure in the knowledge that her family was whole and present. "I still work nights sometimes," Akira said quietly. "When buildings need cleaning after hours for special events, Kenji and I go together. I teach her about dignity in all work, about how every job matters, about how worth isn't determined by what others see." "That's beautiful," Michelle said. "You're teaching her what I had to learn the hard way, that extraordinary people exist everywhere, doing every kind of work, and our job is to notice them." "Speaking of noticing," Akira said, "I got an email today from a woman who read about our story. She's been working as a receptionist for 3 years, but she has a master's degree in chemical engineering, lost her job during the recession, couldn't find work in her field, took whatever was available. She asked if Chen Global might look at her qualifications." "What did you tell her?" "That we'd absolutely look at her qualifications, and that regardless of whether we have an opening, her worth isn't determined by her current job title. That she should keep believing in herself even when invisible." Michelle leaned against him, feeling profound gratitude for this man who had transformed her understanding of everything that mattered. "You're changing the world, Akira. One person at a time." "We're changing the world," he corrected. "Together, that's how it works." High above them, stars emerged between clouds, bearing witness to two people who had found each other across impossible divides. The billionaire CEO who learned to see, the janitor who refused to disappear, the child who believed in both of them. They'd built something that transcended categories and defied expectations, a family chosen rather than assigned, a partnership based on mutual growth rather than mutual benefit, a love that honored rather than demanded. In the end, it wasn't about rags to riches or Cinderella transformation. It was about recognition, seeing worth that was always there but often overlooked, valuing presence over performance, choosing connection over the comfortable certainty of isolation. It was about being brave enough to love across boundaries, humble enough to learn from unexpected teachers, wise enough to know that success measured in human terms looks nothing like success measured in purely financial ones. And it was about the radical possibility that the most important people in our lives might be the ones we walk past every day without noticing until we're finally ready to truly see. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.